Good afternoon, everyone. This is Backyard Reads, and today we're talking about Louis L'Amour's The Skyliners. To begin off, I actually did try and record this another time, but I didn't really have that much to say, and that's kind of my fault as a reviewer, and this is generally my first time doing all this. All this entire channel, all about it. And I suppose I just didn't really understand what I wanted to say or wanted to get across. And again, that's my understanding of reviewing. Now, this is a Western book like the others I have reviewed. Western books are pretty synonymous with America, specifically the desert, the far west, the southwest, I believe. Yeah, the southwest area, which is like a conglomeration of Arizona, parts of Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and I think Texas. Now, technically, Texas is both the south and then the southwest, because Texas is a huge state. Most people would associate the West or Westerns with the Southwest, like those areas. But there's quite a few Westerns that are based in Virginia, West Virginia, Colorado, Montana, and others, like other places that you might call the Midwest. And you can find a lot of stories and people and culture for out there in those states, and you can see a lot of the cowboy hats, the wide-brimmed cowboy hats. Like you get the weaved hats for hot weather and the felt hats for cold weather. That's off script. It begins with two brothers, the two Sackett brothers. That's Sackett. The Sackett brothers coming out from Colorado and going west towards the Midwest. No, not Midwest, to where the Southwest is. And they ran out of money. They're running out of money, and they're like, we need to find something to help with our funds to go further out west. And so they managed to do that by contracting with this old man who asked the Sackett brothers to escort his granddaughter out west to meet her father. And so they do so. But while the complication comes, and when they are traveling west, they encounter an outlaw called Black Fetchin. And Black Fetchin is this handsome sort of man who is like ambitious and greedy and really wants a lot of money and really find all the success in the world. Now throughout the whole rest of the story, there's this pursuit of the Sackett brothers by Black Fetchin and his gang. You read throughout the book that there's all these terrible things that Black Fetchin does. Like he kills a lot of people, kills the grandpa, he kills this group of ranchers, he steals their cattle, and he plans to do all these other things. And then eventually it leads to Black Fetchin's demise, as most heroic westerns go when dealing with outlaws. And this is no mistake a heroic western. Heroic westerns are very different to the modern westerns where they kind of go like, oh yeah, technically everyone's the bad guy and everyone's foul, everything's shit, blah 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 blah. The good guys never win, the bad always thrive, so on, so on, so on. I don't want to talk about that. It's not entirely appropriate for this book right now. One thing to say about this book is it's entirely in first person, and it's the kind of first person that it's not exactly the easiest read, because there is sometimes a lot of this slang and specific sort of voice that might be a little bit confusing, but then you do wrap your mind around it eventually, and then it's not so bad. You get a real feel of journey and a little bit of this conflict between the Sackett and the Fetchins gang. It ends with this whole explosive... No, it doesn't end completely with this explosive exchange. There's generally 3 main bits of extreme action, and they can be a bit tense and exciting, but it's only the 3rd one in which ends the story. What I understand about the Sacketts, for the author, all his books, from what I understand, have a Sackett in almost all of them, and it's all these diverging stories of people doing all sorts of things and all sorts of trouble going around the world, well, not the world, but around America, cowboy country, and coming up into problems and all that. You find that with the book, it's pretty interesting to read through, and you do get a general feel of how the West would be, conflicts, the people, language, travel even, and the slowness of it all, because a lot of people don't realize that. The US is huge. It's massive, and most people don't realize this because they've been driving cars for their entire life, or they've been using planes, trains, or any sorts of things, and that's modern technology. There is like several close calls throughout the book on which the main character nearly bites it, but manages to save himself just in time. Does help that in some moments that the girl that they are supposed to escort actually kind of falls in love with the main character, the point of view character, you know, the POV. In respect to the romance, it's not very great. It's not very interesting, and it feels like maybe a little rushed, or rather almost non-existent, or maybe a little bit sudden at times. It does seem a bit of a detriment, but you also have to think of it from the perspective that it is entirely from first person, and there's even bits where he's like talking out his mind, like some of the paragraphs are like speaking like he would speak. For instance, me, I held my own rifle in my left hand this while, so I just flipped her up, my hand grasped the action, and I was ready. 2 of us stood there facing the 9 of them, and it looked like blood on the ground. When it comes with the first person perspectives, it can make or break a book, and there's generally a reason why most books or stories are told in the third person, because it's generally easier to see how people are acting and what's happening from a slightly removed view than getting into the head like the first person, and it generally does take more skill. To return to the romance, it doesn't really seem to build that much, but then it's not really about the romance, it's about this one sort of conflict going out in the West, like going to the West, a Western story of exploration, of danger, of combat, of all these sorts of things, and that's what the story is. It's not romance, it's not all these typical romances that you might see at a Walmart or in the romance section of a bookstore. It's not a very common thing. It's not really the focus. It's about heroic West. It's heroes, villains, conflict between the two. It's not this fully black and white, good versus evil sort of thing. It's very much a sort of grayscale, but it's still very heroic despite it being a grayscale. And that's generally what kind of gives this book its teeth. Because if it was just a black and white story of the good guy is 100% good and he would never do anything bad, would always own up to it, doesn't always happen. You can kind of it's about the human nature, the moral gray area, and the human nature of greed, pursuit of wealth, and ultimately the folly of it. Because you find that one of the main reasonings for Black Fetchon going out to the West and marrying this girl is greed for something else. You even find out that the thing that he was pursuing is not even that it's just a fairy tale. And it's ultimately this fairy tale, this myth, that got him killed. It's a very short book at 151 pages. In this book, it says it looks like about 15 books, maybe more. I don't know, but I know that this is a very old book, as you can tell by the very yellowed pages. That's almost like high visibility yellow. It's like really aged, and you can see the difference. And like even the inside, it's very yellow, and you can even see that like back then this book cost 50 cents. That's a really cheap book, man. I see that and I go, man, I wish I could have a book like that for that cheap. And you know what? I actually got this at a library for 25 cents, so it was even cheaper than that. Haha. I'm not sure if it's available or if it's in print. And if it is in print, it might be in a series of omnibuses, for all I know, because it seems like these books are pretty short, and really maybe only just barely inches out to being a novel. If you wanted to get into Western, it's not a bad idea to do this. That is with the caveat that it is entirely in first person, and some of the language might be a bit weird. And if the language if it seems a bit weird for you, then maybe you should go for something else. But otherwise, I would recommend this. Yeah, and I just kind of like the painterly cover. Looks good. And that's my review.